So, thinking involved in problem solving and as well as in forming concepts. So, beside these two mental activities, thinking also involved in reasoning and decision making. So, what is reasoning? Reasoning is the mental activity of transforming informations to reach conclusions. So basically, our cognitive ability to use information, available and new informations to make a conclusion. Okay, reasoning is involved in problem solving as well and in decision making. So it's also a skill closely related to critical thinking. So there are two types of reasoning, inductive reasoning and deductive reasonings. So if you may recall what we have learned in the earlier chapters, especially in research and scientific methods, so you will remember that we have talked about inductive and deductive reasoning. So what is inductive reasoning? Inductive reasoning is reasoning from a specific observation to make a general conclusion or what we call as generalization. Okay, in contrast to deductive reasoning, is basically a reasoning from a general case that is always known, case such as theory, and then we use this general observation, general rules to a very specific case or very specific instance. So reasoning from deductive reasoning from a general case that is known to be true to a specific instant. So it's basically on the opposite side. Inductive from specific to general, deductive from general to specific. In inductive reasoning, example of inductive reasoning is psychological research. Okay, it's often inductive. Psychologists study a sample in order to make generalizations about a population. Okay, for deductive reasoning, on the other hand, scientists use theories, and usually theories are general statements to make predictions and then evaluate their prediction by making further observation. This further observation usually a specific case. So using deductive reasoning, we draw conclusion based on facts, okay, which we have tested based on the general theoretical assumption. Okay, so in this figure is basically depict the difference between inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. For inductive reasoning, like I mentioned, it starts from specific case and we want to make a general conclusion or generalizations to a bigger or wider perspective. On the other hand, deductive reasoning, we have a general principles, so we want to make a predictions on a very specific case. So from general, start from general to a very specific issues or case. Okay, so in this reasoning, we use it in a lot of other thinking process, especially in solving problem as well as decision making. So when there are more than one alternatives or there are more than one issues, there are more than one options, people involved in decision making process. So what is decision making? Decision making is the mental activity of evaluating alternatives and choosing among them. Okay, so this differentiate between decision making and problem solving. When you have a problem, you don't have any other alternatives. You have to figure out its own solution. So that is not a decision making. Okay, so basically, you try to formulate or design solution for a problems. Unless when you have a problem, and then there are 2 or 3 or more possible solutions, then you involve in decision making. So reasoning uses established rules to draw conclusions. In contrast, in decision making, such rules are not established. We don't have it. And we may not know the consequences of our decision. Okay, so there are two types of reasoning as well as decision making. Okay, these involve the higher order of our mental process or our thinking. So first we have automatic system. Some book will call it as type 1 system or system 1, and we have another control system, or some book will call it as type 2 or system 2. Okay, these two are all involved in reasoning and decision making. For automatic systems, is basically involve processing that is rapid, heuristic, and intuitive. So it's very fast. We can come to the decision very quickly, and we are not using much deep thinking in that. On the other hand, for the control system, the processing of getting to the decision that is slower, effortful, and analytical. So it takes longer time, deep thinking and evaluation, as well as reasoning. So there are two different automatic system and control system. The type of problems as well as the type of mood a person experience, okay, problem and mood, may as well affect the types of processing that we use. Okay, so our mood, our feeling, okay, our emotion at a particular times will also influence what type of processing we are using, either automatic, quick and fast, or control processing, deep and careful thinking. Okay, for example, how mood affects our decision to use or our tendency to use a certain type of processing. Easy and less taxing decision. Okay, decisions that do not require a lot of considerations. Decisions that do not involve a lot of other people or stakeholders. So people usually use automatic processing. Okay, but at the same time, when people have a more positive mood, okay, happy, cheerful, okay, pleasant feelings. So all of these positive mood usually makes people tend to use automatic processing. Okay. On the other hand, when people face difficult problems, complex issues, complicated issues, so people usually will use control processing, a deep, careful, effortful processing. And most of the time, when people are in negative mood, okay, they are sad, they are worried, for example. So in this sense, in this case, people usually use control processing. So in contrast to automatic processing, they are common belief that when we are in good mood, we think it better. In other words, we use control processing. But based on this perspective and these findings, actually it's the other way around. Okay, when people feel sad or worried, they involve in more control processing rather than automatic processing. So why do we need to understand these two different types of reasoning and decision making? These two different types of system, automatic system or control system, automatic processing or control processing. Why do we need to know? For control system or control processing, there is no much problem with that. Because of why? Because people take time, they are careful, deep thinking on that issue. So they are considering many factors at the same time to come to a decision or to solve a problem or to make a reason. However, when people tend to use automatic system, quick, fast, okay, heuristic kind of thinking, there are a lot of risks doing that automatic processing. So here, why we need to understand different types of reasoning and decision making, because we don't want to commit the same mistake that people have when they use automatic system. Okay, there are problems that associated with people who tend to use automatic system. Okay, these all of the problems we can categorize under heuristic and biases. So people may have committed problems such as loss aversion, confirmation bias, hindsight bias, availability heuristic, base rate neglect, and representativeness heuristic. So let's look at one by one what are these potential mistakes that we may commit if we depend on automatic processing or automatic system. Okay, so the first one, additional fruitful subject of decision-making research are the biases and heuristic, or some book will call it as rule of thumb, that affect the quality of decisions that a person make. Okay, why? Because these rule of thumb are very quick, available to the persons to use or to use it every time. Okay, does not requires a lot of effort. So the first one is heuristics. So what is heuristic? I think we've talked about this at the beginning of the chapter. It's very a mental shortcuts, okay, intuitive and efficient ways of solving problems and making decisions. They are often at work when we make a decision by following our gut feeling, okay, not based on a proper consideration of all factors involved. Okay, heuristic is a very fast techniques or methods for us to solve problem or to make decision. However, heuristic and gut feelings can lead to mistakes. Okay, so that's why we need to talk about this, because we don't want to all the time committing a mistake or doing or making a wrong decision. Okay, so the second or one of the example of heuristics and biases that people always commit in making decisions is loss aversion. Okay, so what is loss aversion? Loss aversion is human tendency to strongly prefer to avoid losses compared to attempting to acquire gains. Okay, I repeat. Loss aversion is the tendency to strongly prefer to avoid losses compared to attempting to acquire gains. So previously I had a discussion in class whereby I asked students what is their preference, okay, if after their graduation, what is their preference, okay, to work in government sector in Malaysia, to work with private sector, or to start a business or doing freelance, for example. So they are saying that most of them, okay, majority of the students in Malaysia, for example, they prefer to secure employment with government sector. Okay, and then I put on several facts. Okay, several facts. Among the facts that I presented to them are the cost of living and the levels of wage, okay, salary that people get working in government sector and working in industry and being a freelance or starting a business. So they started to have a think about that. Why? I said that due to cultural influence, people in this part of the world, they prefer job security over opportunity to gain more. Okay, so this preference of job security over opportunity to gain more is related to loss aversion. Give you examples. If you are an engineer, okay, graduated, and then you are starting your job without experience, okay, so you are fresh graduates. So your starting salary in Malaysia would be around 1,800 ringgit to 2,400 ringgit. Okay, that is starting for people who don't have working experience yet. Okay, giving the difference between industries. So here people prefer to take this job, okay, because it provide job security, and they would rather let go an opportunity to gain even more than 2,400 ringgit. Okay, so this is related to loss aversion, tendency to strongly prefer to avoid losses compared to attempting to acquire gains. Okay, another example that we can use for loss aversion is how a person would decide whether to save money in their saving accounts or to withdraw this money from the bank and make an investment. Okay, so if we apply loss aversion concepts to the persons, the persons most probably will not take the risk of losses, okay, the investment, and they will prefer their money to stay there as a saving rather than take out this money and invest the money in something else. Why? Because the tendency to strongly prefer to avoid losses compared to attempting to acquire gains. Okay, another example of heuristic and biases in decision making and reasoning is confirmation bias. Okay, confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is the tendency to search for and use information that supports one's ideas rather than refutes them. Okay, so this is also a problem of fixation, but fixations towards belief, towards people that they like, towards parties that they support to, okay, towards their own preference. So they basically block their mind from accepting other people's ideas or from identifying signs, symptoms of people or objects or evidence that go against their ideas or their beliefs. So usually you can see this with people who are extreme or who are fixated with their own political belief, okay, political parties. Okay, I can give you a lot of example on that. Okay, you can look around. There are people who tend to only see the good things about their political party. Okay, even though there are obvious errors or obvious limitation or weaknesses with their political leaders, they will not admit or acknowledge that. Instead, whatever support their political ideas, their political parties, and their political leaders, they will emphasize on that and they will avoid acknowledging or accepting the reasons, the evidence, the arguments that show their political ideas, their political leaders or political parties have done something which is not correct. Okay, example of confirmation bias. Another type of bias is hindsight bias, the tendency to report falsely after the fact that one has accurately predicted an outcome. Okay, so this is also obvious in our surrounding, in our society, in our culture, whereby people can simply claim that they have actually anticipated the outcome. Okay, if you are doing some programs, okay, and then you have a negative perceptions towards someone, okay, and it's happened to be in your team, the organizer, and then something wrong happens to your program, and then you will always say that, I already predicted that. Okay, this happen because of that person involved in your organization or as part of the committee members. So the hindsight bias, the tendency to report falsely after the fact that one has accurately predicted an outcome. Why is not correct? Because there are other possible factors that may have influenced the outcome, not necessarily because a factor, not necessarily because a person. But after it's happened, someone claimed that actually he already anticipated that or she already predicted that. Okay, example of hindsight bias. Another one is availability heuristic. Okay, a prediction about the probability of an event based on the ease of recalling or imagining similar events. Okay, availability heuristic. So when we want to make a decision, okay, say put yourself in a meeting, for example. So you have to come up with a new strategy to recruit students, okay, or recruit lecturers. So someone come in and someone say that we can no longer depend on online advertisement. Because of why? Because there are a lot of competitions there and people nowadays start to have suspicions towards online advertisement because there are a lot of scammers out there. Because a lot of people who don't put a proper procedures in there so people avoid believing in online advertisements. So someone come in and someone say that why not we use snowballing technique? And when you heard about snowballing technique in advertisement, you've never come across that term before. Okay, this is just an example. Never come across that term before. So when you ask the person, okay, when you ask the persons to explain what he meant by snowballing techniques, so the person said that we can use our current students, okay, to use word of mouth, okay, to encourage, to recommend, okay, to go and talk with their friends and talk about the good things about our schools, our institution, so that their friends will be attracted to join us. Okay, it's kind of a snowball, okay, about avalanche. So it started from a small ball, it's become big and it become avalanche, okay, a snowballing technique. So people tend to agree or make decisions towards these sorts of suggestion before they can make sense. Why they can make sense? Because it's easier for them to recall and imagining similar events based on the example given, as compared to someone who come in who say that we can use the system called MBO, Management by Objective, whereby everyone will have a matrix to consider, okay, to use methods that will attract people to bombard social media and media with news about our institution. Okay, if people find that MBO, Management by Objective, is something that difficult for them to imagine, they have not considered it near to them, they've never known them, even though MBO is a better option than snowball, people would least likely to accept the suggestion of using MBO. Why? Because for them it's very difficult to recall any instances that people use MBO as compared to snowball. So why people make decisions to use snowball? Because for them, snowball easier for them to recall, to imagine, and to relate. So basically, people are using availability heuristic. Okay, another types of biases and heuristic, which is problems when we want to make decision from automatic system, is base rate neglect. Okay, base rate neglect. The tendency to ignore information about general principles in favor of specific but vivid information. Okay, so this happen a lot in our society. So I give you examples. Say in your institution, you have a very clear guidelines, okay, a very clear guidelines on how to recruit a new teachers, okay, a new ustaz, a new ustazah. Okay, examples. The requirements to be teachers in your institution must possess bachelor degree in Islamic study, for example. Must have at least 4 years of teaching experience. Okay, must have a good track records in conducting teaching and learning activities. So you have these three procedures. And suddenly, there is a candidate applying to your institution, okay, but this candidate is a very famous person, okay, social influencer. His or her YouTube or Instagrams have thousands of followers, okay, 500,000 followers. Once he or she makes the videos or make the content, there will be a lot of people watching, commenting on that. So when this type of person applying to your institutions, there will be a group of people who tend to directly accept his or her application, even though you have not been evaluating the persons from the three guidelines or procedures that are available in your institution. Whether the person have degree in Islamic study or not, whether the person have 4 years of working experience or not, or good teaching and learning track records. Okay, why? Why people have this tendency to accept directly? Because of base rate neglect. The tendency to ignore information about general principles in favor of very specific but vivid information. If this person is famous, he must be having a good knowledge in Islamic study. If the person have a lot of followers, he must have a very good understanding of Islamic knowledge. Okay, for example. So that is base rate neglect. Another examples of heuristic, okay, problems or mistake that we commit when we want to make a decision and to reason, okay, when we use automatic system or automatic processing is representativeness heuristic. Okay, just now we talked about availability heuristic, but this is representativeness heuristic. Okay, the tendency to make judgments, okay, tendency to make judgment about group memberships based on physical appearances or the match between a person's and one stereotype of a group rather than on available base rate information. So this is sometimes involved when people committing discrimination or biases towards races or group of people. Okay, so there are people from Malaysia, there are people from Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, Brunei, okay, Philippines. Malays are coming from different countries. Okay, so there are Malays from Malaysia, there are Malays from Thailand, there are Malays from Indonesia, Malays from Brunei, Malays from Philippines. Okay, when you see a certain features, okay, the way they dress, the language that they speak, so we tend to make judgment, okay, about group membership based on physical appearance. Okay, say for example, you meet people are speaking Bahasa Melayu in Singapore, so you automatically consider or judge the person, this is from Malaysia. Okay, why? Because if it's from Singapore, even Malays, they will speak English, for example. So what we are doing, so we are basically using representativeness heuristic. Okay, we make judgment about group memberships based on physical appearances. Okay, based on what we hear the person speak, the language that the person use. In IIUM, for example, in my university, in our university, so there are certain trends that we can recognize among female students, which is the way they wear their hijab. Okay, so and this is quite unique in a way that if you go outside in Malaysia and you come across a group or a person, a female person, who wear these types of hijab, you can simply know that this is from IIUM. So this sister is from UIA. Okay, why? Because it's basically you have this representativeness heuristic. This is the fashion of IIUM sisters. Okay, even though it may not necessarily so. Okay, it could be someone else, someone who's not related to IIUM at all. Okay, so basically what we are using to make that decisions is based on representativeness heuristic. Okay, our textbook have make and these brief comparisons between loss aversion, confirmation bias, base rate neglect, hindsight bias, representativeness heuristic, and availability heuristic. Brief description and example given here. So you can have a look. This is example from the textbook. Okay, some example that I've given to you is from my own explanation. Okay, I think that is from perspective of reasoning and decision making. So under thinking, so we talk about concepts, we talk about problem solving, and just now we talk about reasoning and decision making.